Imagine this, one moment I'm living on just $400 a month in a tiny little apartment in Guatemala with no TV, no internet. Now the next, I own $3 million in real estate portfolio. I'm jet setting between luxury homes and eating in fancy restaurants. Now, which would you say was a better life? You probably think the answer is obvious, right? The life with all the luxuries, right? But you see, here's the twist. The real question is, what does better life even mean? And how to measure your life? Is it about how successful you are, what you've achieved, how much money you've made? Or is there something maybe deeper about how fulfilled you feel, how inspired and driven you are, and can you build a life that combines both riches and inspiration? Now, those are fundamental questions. And you know what? Strangely enough, we don't seemingly have a commonly agreed answer. And look, I've experienced both, living a simple life with so little and a life with abundant material belongings and richness. So I have this unique perspective to reflect on both and to be able to draw some powerful conclusions. And I also saw that was when I have it all, that I actually lost my way and lost myself. So I spent a lot of time reflecting on these chapters of my life, which were at the very opposite in terms of lifestyle and financial means. The contrast was massive, and yet there's some really surprising truths that I came to uncover that I'm going to share with you, including discovering the 7 pillars. But for that, I first need to take you back to the first chapter in Guatemala. You see, the small city of Antigua, to me, was just magical, with cobblestone streets, colorful markets, the towering volcano of Agua. And I lived there on just $400 a month, working for a small startup. My room cost, I think, $100 in rent. I had no TV, no internet, but you know what? I spent my evenings reading books, reading poetry, playing my guitar, meeting with friends, or I'll be gazing at the stars on my terrace. You see, life was simple, but it felt real, it felt authentic. You know, I felt alive. It was like time stopped. I had left the frantic business world and landed in a small little paradise. And you know what? That's how it felt. Inside of me, I pursued what I loved. I felt free. It was like an adventure. But then, one day, everything changed. One morning at work, in Guatemala City, 2 armed men stormed in, shoving a gun to my temple. I was tied up, duct tape placed over my mouth, and I was lying on the ground thinking to myself, this is it. I saw their faces. They're gonna kill us. I was lucky that day, and my colleagues and I survived, but something inside of me shifted. I suddenly felt like life is fragile. I realized that this simple, magical chapter in Guatemala, maybe it wasn't sustainable. So I made a decision. It was time for me to get serious, to pursue the life I was told would bring me happiness and fulfillment. You know, pursue a career, get lots of money, and most importantly, find stability. So let's fast forward ahead. And over the years, I climbed the corporate ladder. I invested in real estate. I built over the years, you know, a $3 million portfolio. I had a big house, had a fancy car, you know, go on luxury vacations. So from the outside, I made it. But inside, the truth is, I was feeling empty. I was losing my fuel. Where was that feeling of being alive, you know, that I had in Guatemala? Where was the sense of freedom and peace? And here's a realization that just like hit me super hard. More money didn't make my life richer. It actually blinded me to what really mattered. So I came to understand that money should not be a goal per se. Now, don't get me wrong, money is amazing what it can unlock. It's like, you know, I came to see money as a resource, a way to get certain things, certain experiences, to have a certain quality of life. But I also saw how it can blind you from what truly matters to you, what makes you feel inspired. When I reflect on my life now, I see the stark contrast between these two contrasts. Guatemala, with almost no money, but I was strengthening parts of myself that I didn't even understand at the time. And what I would call my mental and emotional pillars, my relationships, my sense of purpose, my creativity. But then as I chased success, I pulled everything to work and I let those other parts kind of fall apart. I just cast them aside without realizing that those areas were the source of that fire that burned inside of me. And that's when I realized that life is not one-dimensional. Fulfillment doesn't come from success alone or from financial means. It comes from building strengths in multiple areas of your life. Look, life is complex. It's multifaceted. It's not just about work or family or health. It's about how all of these areas, they come together. And so as I listed out these aspects of life, I started to organize them, writing them down, grouping them into specific themes, and I decided to call them the pillars. I saw that when multiple pillars were weak, then the whole structure of your life became unstable. You see, the pillars support our well-being, our sense of satisfaction with life overall, and everything I was reading, all the studies, the science, the research, the papers, they're all confirming that this approach made sense. Now, it's critical for me to highlight one thing. The pillars themselves, they're not new. They've been called many different things. They've been either subgroups or in additional dimensions. But ultimately, how one calls them or groups them is not what's critical. What is key is to have a simple method to see your choices through a new lens. So once I established the pillars, I started to research everything I could find on each of them. And from that moment onward, I started to see my life through this new lens. It was as if I was given a new virtual reality headset. I placed it over my eyes, and it helped me see the world in a completely different new way. I started to understand the impact of the choices that I was making. I saw which decisions and actions were weakening which pillars and which were strengthening them. So today, I'm just gonna introduce you to the pillars. We're gonna go much, much deeper in the future as there's so much science behind them. But the goal today is just to use my own experiences, my true story, to help you grasp the overall concept. So here they are. Let's go to the pillars. Emotional pillar, your emotions and feelings, your ability to navigate them and find inner peace. Mental pillar, the quality of your thoughts, your focus, your ability to handle stress. Physical pillar, your health, your energy, your physical well-being. Social pillar, the depth and quality of your relationships and connections. Occupational pillar, your work, your hobbies, your interests. Environmental / material pillar, your connections to your environment, your surroundings, where you live, where you work and play. And the material resources that support your life. And finally, spiritual pillar, your sense of purpose and connection to something greater than yourself. The 7 pillars became my way to deconstruct life into manageable parts. It was like a map for understanding as where I was striving and where I was falling short. And it also allowed me to look at the chapters of my life. And at that moment, a key shift took place with one of the most important lessons I learned. Life isn't just about money, success, or achievement. In fact, the strength of your pillars, these foundational areas of your life, they're gonna play a key role in determining your sense of fulfillment. You see, in Guatemala, those pillars were strong, even with almost no money. Later, with millions, I left many of them crumble. So let me illustrate this quickly. I'll contrast those 2 chapters of my life, Guatemala and the corporate world, using the lens of the 7 pillars. So let's break it down. Emotional. In Guatemala, I felt at peace, connected to myself, my surroundings. In my corporate life, stress, anxiety became constant companions. Mental. My thoughts in Guatemala were creative, reflective. I was reading, I was feeding my mind with inspiring content. And later, the corporate world, I felt exhausted after a long day at work. I stopped fueling my mind. Physical. In Guatemala, I lived simply. I ate fresh local food. I walked everywhere. And as I climbed up the corporate ladder, unfortunately, my health took a backseat to my career. I was just too busy at work, and unfortunately, I started to drink so much more. Social. In Guatemala, I didn't have internet, so I spent time with friends, talking about the world, dreaming. Later, when I was in the corporate world, it took so much of my time. I made less effort with relationships. I was just too busy. Occupational. In Guatemala, I worked for meaning, not for money. In my corporate life, I worked for success, but not for fulfillment. Environmental. In Guatemala, I thrived in simplicity. I loved the town of Antigua. I loved the city. I loved where I was. My corporate life, I surrounded myself with material abundance, but strangely felt empty. The more I bought, the more I needed. And I had to live where work was rather than be in a place that I truly chose and loved. Spiritual. In Guatemala, I had time to reflect on life's bigger questions. I read book after book. I spent hours writing my thoughts, reflections, and journals. I felt as if I was delving into the big questions of life. In my corporate life, I barely had time to pause. I was just too busy, too tired at the end of the day. So I spent the time just like watching movies or series, being entertained. Now, what I'm going to say now is key. I don't want you to misunderstand me. I was very fortunate to have that corporate life. I was amongst the lucky ones. So this is not about what one life being better than the other. It was about seeing where I was strong and where I had let things slip. I'm not saying that the corporate world was bad. I was successful. I had achieved so much. I was truly amongst the privilege. I was one of the lucky ones. The challenge was that I had stopped investing in many areas of my life that ultimately were key to feeling fulfilled. And the big aha moment came when I realized that it was possible to reconcile the two. I just needed to use this new compass to make better decisions. I built a new map and I saw that the 7 pillars could guide me to a new way to approach my life. So I started to assess my life through each of these pillars. I started to see what strengthens them, what weakens them. I started to see where are the gaps. And I built a simple scale to assess each of the pillars. And I'll share that later in a future video. But today, I just want to briefly introduce you to the concepts. In the future, we're going to dive so much deeper and I'll show you how the framework can be so powerful. Now, I'll tell you, I'm an optimist. It's not about doom and gloom. You see, I came to understand that you can have both success and fulfillment, but it does require a new way of thinking, a new way to approach your life, a new way to help you make better decisions. And that's what I plan to share with you, how to build strength in multiple key areas of your life, not just one. And I'm going to share how to use the 7 pillars as a guide to create a life that feels truly rich, not just in money, but also in meaning. So join me on this crazy journey. I'm going to share everything I learned, my true stories, the ups, the downs also, as there were many of them. But there's so much to uncover. I'm going to show you how to use this framework and apply it to your own life, because you deserve more than just success. You deserve a life that inspires you. Thank you for watching.